It didn't give us the ability to conquer it. But under grace, under the dispensation of the new covenant, or the dispensation of the gospel, as it's sometimes phrased, this brings victory over sin. How does it do that? How does it give us victory over sin? By giving us Christ himself. Looking at this, haven't we? Over the last few weeks, we've been talking about this, even praying about it. Christ in us. No longer I that live, but Christ lives. Okay? So, what does it mean then? Let's go back to that verse we read, Romans 6, verse 14. One of the very first verse that I started with. Romans 6, 14. Notice what people focus on, hey, I'm not under the law, I'm under grace. And they leave out the first part of that verse. Let's read it slowly, shall we? Verse 14. For sin shall not have dominion over you, for you are not under the law, but under grace. Did you catch that? Sin shall not have dominion over you. You won't be a slave now to sin like you were under the law. You knew what to do, but you just couldn't do it. It says in Romans 7, isn't it? That Paul says, I know what to do, but how to do it, how to bring that about, I cannot find, or I do not find. But under grace, we are victors over sin. How come? Because we've got Christ. Christ dwelling, living within us. The law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. John 1, 17. So we are given grace, not so we can carry on in lawlessness, right? Sin is the transgression of the law, 1 John 3, verse 4. But we are given grace so that we can fulfill all good works. You know that God prepares good works for us to do in advance. And we are given grace that we might do those good works. Let's say this, always say it. We are not saved through good works. You cannot be made right with God through amassing deeds, good works, and thinking if I get enough good deeds I can sort of climb up them and get to heaven. Never, never. That's not how a person is made right with God. It's by grace through faith, through the shed blood of Jesus Christ. You can never, our own righteousness is as filthy rags. Nevertheless, we are saved to do good works. We are saved to walk in obedience to Christ. And I've already established that there are commandments of Christ in the new covenant. There are apostolic commandments, apostolic injunctions that are not there for us to say, oh, well, that's interesting, isn't it? I never thought about that before. I never saw that before. Well, actually, they're there so we obey them. They're there so that we comply. Grace to truly love God's law. Which law? Is moral law. It says, you shall love me with all your heart, mind, soul and strength, and love your neighbour as yourself. You say, well, I find that very hard. Yeah? And that's why we've got grace. That's why we've got Christ, so you and I can do that. Of course we can't do it by ourselves. There's a hymn, and there's a wonderful verse in it. It says this, ponder anew what the Almighty can do. Maybe you need to do that this morning. Maybe you need to ponder anew, afresh, just what God can do in your life and through you. Grace to love God's law. Not circumcision, but rather a circumcision done without hands. I wonder William Tyndale could proclaim grace, all grace. He saw it, he knew it, understood. It's grace, it's all grace. But grace for what? Grace to follow after holiness. Grace to take every thought captive. Grace to be dead to sin and not to live any longer therein. Grace to become the servants of righteousness. These are all verses from the Bible I'm quoting to you, by the way, so don't lynch me. These are all verses from the New Covenant. That's why we have grace, why grace came, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. So we can do these things that the Bible talks about. Grace to overcome the wicked one. Grace to be more than conquerors through him that loved us. Not turning the grace of our God into lasciviousness, as Jude said. Not using, I'm under grace. Yeah, I can sin, and it doesn't matter because I've just got this grace hanging over me, and God's let me go now. I can just go and do what I want. Don't need to worry. No. That's not why we have grace. We have grace so we can do that which is right. So you and I can live right and do that which is good and pleasing in God's sight. Grace is a precious thing. And it is there so that we don't abuse it, don't squander it,